Hello and welcome to Third Eye Thinkers. I'm your host, Michelle Welch.
Hi, I'm your host, Megan Benanti. Thanks for joining us today.
And today we are so excited to have a very special guest with us.
Oh, yeah.
It's Ciro Marchetti. Actually, Ciro Marchetti. How'd I do, Ciro? Is that good?
Not too bad.
Not too bad. So I'm going to read a little bit about Ciro to you guys, and I really am just so excited to read about it and to have him on the show. So if I sound a little nervous, it's because I just think he's so fabulous.
Yeah,
yeah, he really is. We're really excited about this. So Ciro Marchetti is arguably, and Megan and I laughed about that, Ciro. You're not arguably. I would say he is the best known contemporary designer of today's Tarot community. His work over the last 15 years has included some of the most popular titles, not just of Tarot, but also of Lenormand, Kipper, and Oracle systems. While he makes no claims of being a reader, and his decks often depart from the more commonly depicted images of Waite Smith and Marseilles. Did I say that right? Marseilles?
Or Marseille.
Marseille, thank you. I am very East Texan, right? Base structures, he clearly has an ability to communicate their core meaning via his visually stunning illustrative style. By balancing recognizable traditional imagery with a reworked fresh face and perspective, the results clearly provide an appealing combination. Recipient of various Deck of the Year awards, of recognition from the Tarot community, along with worldwide sales, easy for me to say, approaching 1 million copies.
Wow.
Yeah, right?
Wow.
His decks have been produced both as self-published editions as well as licensed releases by major publishers and translated into multiple languages. We are proud to welcome Ciro to our show.
Welcome, Ciro. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you for the invitation.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're coming to Texas, which we're also really excited about this weekend.
Yes.
Yes, and there's a cold front, so I've been told, yeah?
Yeah, that'll be good for you. It'll remind you of your old days in the UK.
Yes, it will, yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's dive in. We've got questions for you. Since we have the artist at hand, we got to find out the answers for many of these things that we've been wondering about over the years. So, why did you decide to create tarot decks to begin with, or a tarot deck? I mean, what was the initial idea to go with that?
Well, obviously, I didn't go to college to learn how to do tarot decks. This was a suggestion on Llewellyn's part. I'd sent them some samples of my work.
Okay.
Hoping to get some freelance work, which they weren't interested in, but they seemed to think that the images I provided offered some sort of some potential for tarot decks. So they contacted me, made a suggestion, explained that there was no money in it. Would I still be interested? And yeah, I was actually. I mean, I'm not completely living under a rock. I was familiar with what tarot decks were. In fact, I had a couple hanging on the wall, one Marseilles and one Rider-Waite. I didn't use them. I literally used them as artwork.
Wow.
Paste them down and frame them and wondered what these weird images were, but whatever they were, I liked them, So, yeah, it was a proposal from Llewellyn, not an idea on my part.
That's fascinating. I never knew that. I was always curious about it. Very cool.
How young were you when you knew that you were an artist and just so incredibly gifted? Did it evolve over time, or how did you get into design and graphic design and art and graphic artistry in general, even before the tarot?
I think gifted is a rather elaborate.
I think you're gifted.
You're already
just
voted
go
gifted.
with it, Ciro. We think you are.
No, gifted, I don't think so. I draw horses pretty good. Does that count?
Yes, I've seen some in your upcoming deck. They're pretty fabulous.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's the only thing I was ever good at, to be honest. I used to get fail grades for pretty much everything else. Even at primary school or elementary school, whatever it's called here, one of the first things we had to do every morning was to draw something that we'd seen on the TV the night before, you know. And I'm that old that what I was watching and all the other kids were watching was, I think, like The Lone Ranger.
Oh, yeah.
And so all the kids that would normally sort of like want to beat me up would then be my friend for like about half an hour because they wanted me to draw Silver, you know, the horse Silver on their homework assignments. And so I guess that's when I first realized I had one ability in life, and that was to draw reasonably well.
Oh, that's awesome.
I think
it was
that,
good.
Yeah, go ahead. I think that makes an interesting point. I was just talking with someone about that the other day, about that a lot of people are really gifted in certain things. And here in the States, I think that a lot of us push people, kids or young adults, into college. It's like, you've got to go, you've got to figure out what you're going to major in. And we were really having a good discussion about that, about, but what is really your talent? You don't like the word gifting, but what's something you're really good at? And it may not be that traditional thing.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, but the pushing part was never an issue. On the contrary, I mean, art wasn't, my parents, bless their soul, wouldn't never sort of assume that art would lead to a profession or a decent job. It was like, okay, so you can draw, but I mean, what about your math grades or whatever?
Right.
So there was never any issue of pushing. College was an indulgence that was not really convincing to my parents. They didn't think this would really get to anything. And to be honest, well, I'm going to talk about this during the presentation, actually, but I kind of wasted my college years. My school years, high school years, were very disciplined. I went to a school that was very similar to that of Hogwarts, It was the whole British, no, seriously, the whole British educational system at that time was very much like Hogwarts, 4 different houses, etc., etc. So,
wow.
I'd like to go into I'm going to discuss that in more detail because there's some really, I think, pretty cool background to that. And so high school was where it all started to come together, and I realized that there was more to this than just drawing nice horses. But then, since I went to an all-boys school, when I graduated from there and went to art college, I kind of really blew it. I mean, it was like parties and girls. And so I wasted my college years, to be honest, and paid a price for that in terms of the first jobs I got in graphic design. I was sort of lagging behind some of my peers and had to do a whole bunch of catch up once reality set in,
Well, that's okay, though. I mean, I think kids nowadays still do that. So, and I know I certainly did. I was, college wasn't my thing either. So,
I think where it started to come together, and as I say, I don't want to sort of go into too much detail here because it is part of the presentation, but I had some very influential characters at high school. One particular teacher, which is probably the most influential person in my life. And we went through a series of exercises that kind of developed our ability to portray concepts in a visual way. And even though I couldn't define why it worked, something was working. And I applied that then in my professional life in graphic design, in a commercial way for packaging and corporate imagery. And that started to take off when I went to South America because with my UK experience and the whole sort of expatriate scenario, it became relatively easy for me to get clients and projects that wouldn't have been so easily available to me in Europe, And with that, got some more exposure and some confidence. But the point I'm getting at is that whilst you wouldn't assume there was a connection between doing corporate graphic work for a major corporation to design a Tyrodex, I think that there is, because everything boils down to that one issue. I'm trying to tell a story through visual means, symbolism, color, typography. They all go into it to get the end result. But essentially, that's what I'm doing. I'm telling a story. That's what tarot cards do. The problem is, what is it that they're trying to say? The jury's out in a lot of cases, right? Throughout history, there's kind of been some to and froing as to what that particular image is supposed to represent. And so that was the challenge, picking my fights as to which one of those historical interpretations was the one that made more sense to me, and how could I retell that story visually in a personal way, other than just yet another Rider-Waite or Marseille's clone. That was the challenge.
Is that part of the reason that you've created more than one, is because you see different solutions or different stories related to the same image?
Absolutely.
Okay.
I mean, the first one with the gilded, bless its soul, was, that was the first one. I was kind of working like a robot in a sense. I mean, I was too scared to take too many deviations. Okay. Yeah, okay, I had my style limited, though it was at the time, because I was using, digital Photoshop. But I did the gilded using a mouse. I mean, how uncomfortable, how unergonomic is that? But conceptually, I was not there to try anything new. I just wanted to keep it safe, Okay. In fact, I remember sort of sending Llewellyn images every couple of weeks as I finished them, waiting for them to say, well, no, hang on a minute, that isn't right, or can you move this or change that? And they never did. I'll give them credit. I think there was only on one card they ever sort of questioned as to why I had done it this particular way. I explained it, they accepted that, and bingo, we're off. But the gilded was just, I repeat, just going by the rules and playing safe. Now, the thing is that when you produce a tarot deck and you hand it over to a publisher, normally, there's no strict rule, but normally there's a lapse of at least a year before those files get turned into some printed item that's sold, Mm-hmm. And that was very frustrating. You had spent like over a year producing these images, and now I had to sort of sit there and wait for the actual birth, And in that time, it was frustrating because I kept thinking, damn, I wish, why did I not do that? Or why didn't I, and all these sort of new ideas came into my head as if like, oh, if only I could do it again, I would do it differently, And then I thought, what the hell, I will do it again, Mm-hmm. So I remember one reviewer or one person on a forum sort of commented that I had produced the Tarot Dreams, which was the follow-up to, because I was riding the success of the Gilded. Well, that was nonsense, because actually I started on the Tarot Dreams before the Gilded ever hit the stores. It was a self-imposed sort of like, I think I can do it differently. I think I can technically do it better, Mm-hmm. By technically, I mean, by then I'd bought a tablet and a digital pen, so I could actually paint in a more comfortable way. But also conceptually, I think I could tell that story a little bit more interesting, et cetera, et cetera. So in all the projects, that's been the motivation. I personally believed that I could do it, if not necessarily better, I think I could do it with a fresh twist. that was the motivation. If I didn't have that, and I must say I don't have that now, if I didn't have that, 9 months to a year is really a pain in the you know what. You know, I didn't want it to become a labor. It had to stay a labor of love.
Right.
Yes.
Wow.
Well, you have so many decks, and I mean, I'm just going to tell you that we have, I think, all of them and all of the decks pretty much now in the store, especially as of this week, because everyone's been asking for them. And I'm like, you guys, you can't buy them all before he gets here. But yes, we've been selling a lot of them already. And so any of the decks that actually that I could get my hands on that are, you know, published and out there that we could get for the store, and the Tarot of Dreams people still love. And I will tell you, Tarot, they love the gilded too. So people are still buying that. But of all those decks, and I know this is probably a question you get asked a lot, but a lot of people want to know. So which one, do you have a favorite deck, and do you have a favorite card within a certain deck? I know the retrospective, which is one of my favorites, by the way. I'm going to tell you, Chiro, that I got the retrospective. I ordered it. And then Megan saw it because I brought it on the show. And she's like, I want that. I want that. And now everybody wants that deck. Anybody I read for wants that deck. So I know that deck combines a lot of your favorite cards from many of your decks. But which one would be your favorite deck and your favorite card, if you could choose?
I'd have to... I can't choose one specifically because there's factors for each. I mean, the gilded I dislike intensely. You know, it annoys me that's if only through sheer numbers of sales. That's what I'm going to be remembered for.
I'll hide it. I'll hide it when you come to the store. I'll hide it when you come in on Friday. Okay, to the store.
No, but having said that, you know, it's the first one, and you never forget your first love, do you? So that has to go down at least by that criteria. The Tarot Dreams, which was the follow-up, has a soft spot because it was the first one where I was making more of a personal statement. The Legacy, I got a little bit more adventurous and started some storytelling. I mean, there's so much tradition and mythology and legend with tarot that I thought, I think I'll sprinkle it with yet one more, my own. Interestingly, I never took it quite that serious. I made up a sort of a romantic mythology of my own for the origin of tarot, never assuming that anyone was going to take it seriously, but of course they did. And so I received lots of emails asking if they could join me next time I go back in time. You know, so I had to be very careful in how I responded to some of these people. But I think, actually, ironically, I guess actually the Oracle is my ultimate favorite because then I was free to fly. You know, there's no rules. No, it should be looking left, or the character should be holding a whatever in its left hand. There's nothing I could do that someone wasn't going to point out to me within 5 minutes of how it was wrong. You know, this was my deck, my images, a reflection of my life, and I'm assuming lots of people have their variation on that. You know, we all have sort of common denominators, and that they would recognize what I was portraying with things that had happened to them. So I think conceptually that one probably is my favorite. Yeah, the Oracle.
Wow.
Oracle Visions.
Very cool. Well, you know, and I was thinking about this. So I counted 11 decks that you've made. Is that correct?
Got no idea. I'm not very good with numbers.
Well, I was looking just on Amazon and found 11 different decks, including, you know, the Kipper. And so I was calculating that's about 850 images that you have created in the intuitive world here. And I'm kind of wondering what you learned from this during this journey. What was part of your growth and experience as far as creating these designs? Does that Is that question clear enough?
Yeah. Well, once again, it was an extension of what I'd said earlier, that, I'm communicating a story or a concept, through the scene. The interesting part is that I learned bit by bit, mainly because people were very quick to sort of point out when things didn't fit the bill, it didn't match traditional expectations. But, for example, I never really understood what the big deal was with the Marseillais. What was it all about? All these cards with just repeated patterns. How can that be such a big deal? And but it was explained to me, both politely and impolitely, that was actually part of its strength. The fact is that people reveled in the freedom of unillustrated or lesser illustrated pip cards. In those patterns, they could conjure up some rationale. They were not limited by a preset scene. And I couldn't argue at that point. So I thought, well, that's fair enough, but it doesn't really have that much challenge and interest to me to merely offer another sort of patterned combination of 7 swords or something. So what I did instead was I tried to create images that did both. They were kind of more definitive. It was a person or an action or whatever, but I always tried to do it in such a way that it left a lot of question marks. None of my faces, for example, smile. They're not happy or sad. They're as neutral as I can make them. And that's quite deliberate, because then that's up to you, the reader, to put some rationale to that. And it should and never be the same. I mean, it'll depend what the other cards are, what the querent's question is, the circumstances. So I'm kind of doing a more decorative version of the Marseillais by having some neutral face or scene looking at you, because then it gives you, it gives the reader more of a blank canvas to add their reading story to.
Yes, that totally makes sense. I've been following you a lot with your new deck that you're coming out with, as far as even when you were trying to name your deck, and I've seen some of the videos, and it is absolutely beautiful. Would you mind telling us a little bit about your latest deck?
I think it's the more a continuation of what I've just said. I mean, it does include a lot more of that, a lot more of some guy or some face looking at you without expression, but there is expression. I mean, that eye contact is inviting you to provide a story for them. I mean, I'm a bit of a voyeur, I guess. If I people watch, if I'm when I'm at an airport or whatever, I'll just sort of sit there and chill and look at these passengers that are sharing this sort of like 30 seconds of presence with me as we go off in our different directions. And I just like to sort of make up stories of what are these people? Are they rich? Are they famous? Are they happy? And I put stories to these nondescript people. And very often when I'm researching for suitable characters, I'll sort of steal an image from Google, but more often than not, it'll only be part of it. It'll be like the eyes from one face, the lips from another. So I'm doing like this sort of digital potato head, and making up a new
That's a good way to put it.
making up a new character. I mean, the only time I've used actual real people in a recognizable way are family and friends. But that's not because they're cheap. I don't have to pay them. So.
Thanks a lot.
Except for one exception.
So what they're referring to is Megan is the Queen of Cups in the Legacy of the Divine, right?
Yeah.
Yes. And I have a beautiful poster of that at my store.
Yeah.
So of you, yes. So I guess you're cheap.
Yeah, I put my foot in it. Actually, there's various exceptions to that rule. Obviously, other queens from other decks have been specifically because I felt that the face really was a compelling one that would work great. The cheap was referring to my kids mainly, like especially my poor son. The number of times I've forced him to wear tights, to be some sort of Renaissance figure, and it's like, in the end, I had to just threaten him. I said, "Listen, man, if you don't wear these damn tights, I'm putting the previous one on Facebook. So you got to do it."
I love that. Well, and you favor your dogs quite a bit. You normally
Yes.
My dogs, yeah. Well, I think that was perfect. I mean, in the latest deck, my current dog is in there, and I think that just sums up the homeliness of that card. He's sitting there on a rocking chair on a warm, sunny afternoon with his food bowl and a little red ball, his toy. I mean, that's it. Home, comfort, safety. It's all summed up,
Yeah, absolutely.
I love that card. What you've posted of that. You said something earlier about the horses and that you could draw horses really well. And when we were in New York, you mentioned you actually started, it was amazing. You started drawing the horses and you showed me a different way you were going to draw them and a little bit of a different perspective on drawing the horses. Could you explain something about that to us? Do you know what I'm talking about? Do you remember?
I don't recall that because that's something I tend to do so often, just sort of like on a napkin or in a restaurant or something, so just doodle away. Interesting regarding horses, I remember I posted an early draft of one of the knights from the new deck, and someone pointed out how I had drawn the gear, the headgear, the reins or whatever they're called, incorrectly or inappropriately, that I'd showed it in sort of like the sort of reins that they'd use just for a training session or something, and it wasn't really like strong enough to be a knight's horse. And I thought, damn, these people really pick up on detail,
Right.
And I sort of like for a few minutes I was really annoyed. I thought, damn it, I've spent hours doing this wonderful horse, in my opinion, and someone immediately picked up on the fact that his headgear is inappropriate for this sort of war horse, And but in the end, I calmed down, had another coffee, and the next day redid it.
Oh, goodness.
You can't get away with much on Facebook and social media, trust me,
I hear you on that.
Well, and what's interesting to me about that is that if I looked at that as a reader and, and I put into question, is this headgear strong enough for this knight? That would be part of my reading, part of the reason that my client picked this deck to work with, and part of the reason that maybe they're trying to manage something that's beyond their control with their current the current equipment they have. So to me, all of that is not a flaw. It's something to learn to see differently. So I commend you on that.
I would sort of like beg to differ on that particular point and acknowledge that I got it wrong in a sense because, 1% of the typical customer or reader would have spotted that or noted that, let alone be concerned by it. But nevertheless, I did feel it was a valid point because, a knight, a strong character, probably this sort of like, Budweiser kind of cart horse, draft horse would have been a typical scenario, a correct historical imagery. So if I depicted a horse with sort of like fancy little sort of equestrian gear on, it doesn't make it necessarily right or wrong, but it doesn't really support the character, you know? Okay. So I was quite happy to change that, because I think those little nuances, if I'm aware of them, yeah, I will fix that. On the contrary, though, there's so many things in Tara that when I've posted an image and people have pointed out why they think it's not right, sometimes that's so subjective.
Correct. Yes.
And historically questionable anyway. That's frustrating. But on those occasions where a little detail is pointed out, listen, you've done this and it should really be that, then that's cool. That's part of the course. And if it's caught and I accept it, I on more than one occasion I've changed an image accordingly. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, we are pressing up against our time, and I just want to tell everyone that we can hear so much more about Ciro and the way all of his process, and we're a audio visual presentation at Soultopia this Saturday from 7:30 to 9:30. We do have some tickets left, but I'm going to tell you, the last I called today, they're going really fast. So you guys need to get on the phone today or get online and buy the tickets if you are going to want to secure a spot there. Just to hear more about the stories, some of the teas that we heard today of the things he's going to talk about during the presentation. So again, that's going to be the Soultopia in Carrollton, Texas this Saturday from 7:30 to 9:30. And thank you again, Ciro, so much. And I look forward to seeing you this weekend.
Yeah, thank you for joining us, Ciro. This has been awesome.
Yes, I'm looking forward to it. If I could, I'll just leave you with some thought, you know?
Oh, please.
Thank you.
Not necessarily related to Tara, but if at first you don't succeed, skydiving is not for you. I'll leave you with it.
We knew those were coming.
Ciro is known for his jokes.
And we meant to throw those in. We meant to ask him.
That was a good one.
Yes.
That was definitely a good one. So, well, thank you all for listening today. You've been listening to Third Eye Thinkers with Michelle Welch and Megan Benanti. If you enjoyed the show today, please give us a 5-star review. And don't forget to subscribe to Third Eye Thinkers on any of your podcast networks or on YouTube. We're produced by Real News Communications Network, and a special thanks to our producer, Matt Stoker, and our social media assistant, Cassie Clayton. Keep on Third Eye Thinking.